Okay, it's 7 o'clock. We have as our first item of business a seating of public hearing on ordinance number 375, commonly referred to as the junk ordinance. I would call that public hearing to order and ask if there are any here who appear in favor or opposed to this ordinance number 375. Any comments at all? Hearing none, I will.
This is the first reading. When can we as a council comment on portions of it?
This is second.
It's a second. And I'd like to comment on a portion of it.
Very well.
A portion of the definitions: enclosed porch, deck, patio, or balcony. It says nothing about a non-enclosed porch, deck, patio, or balcony. Can you address that part, David, please? Page 4, Article 3, definition under A.
I don't know, this is the same, that language hasn't changed in the 2 months that we've been circulating. This is right out of Huntington. A platform located at and attached to or abutting against the entrance to a residential building, completely covered by a roof and enclosed by fully intact glass and or fully intact screens. Screens or framed wire mesh or framed plastic mesh used to prevent intrusion by insects but permitting airflow.
Yeah.
If you have a completely enclosed porch, that's basically a room in your house,
right?
And we can't control the interior of someone's home.
Okay. Okay.
But if it's like mostly enclosed but open on one side and you can see it from the street, you can't do those activities that we've been talking about, like storing firewood and clutter and all that other stuff.
Where does that come into effect any place in here other than that definition?
I think it's in the prohibited activities.
It's the
very top of page 5.
Page 5.
It says
other than in a completely enclosed building or structure. So the porch is an enclosed structure and not, if it has all that definition.
It has all that in it.
If it is just a porch with a banister around it, it is not considered an enclosed.
That's right. That's correct.
Okay. That was the clarification I wanted. Thank you very much,
Yes,
sir.
sir. You got it.
Any other comments or questions? Then I will close the meeting on the public hearing, and I will call a regular meeting of Buckhannon City Council to order and ask you to join me in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. We'll respect the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Don't have any guests who signed up to speak. Brings us to department board reports. Michael?
Just some house cleaning business as we end the fiscal year 2012-13. You have in front of you budget resolution 2013-07. It's just basically putting monies as we're required by state code and our hotel motel occupancy tax, trying to get that as tight as we can to the correct amount of disbursements year to date. Also, we've taken some funds out of snow removal because obviously that's probably not going to happen anymore this fiscal year. And we actually transferred that over into streets and highways. In particular, you'll see a breakdown on the other page, which tells you that actually went into street paving. Pretty quick, pretty simple budget resolution to end up the fiscal year. My recommendation to council is to approve resolution 2013-07.
Motion to approve. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Further discussion? All All in favor, signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. This requires signature.
Actually, I'm sorry, it's a roll call vote. I apologize.
Yeah, it's roll. Call or roll.
Tom O'Neill,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
Dave Thomas,
Yes.
myself, yes, Mayor?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Next item, and I apologize because the next item just really needs unanimous approval. The next couple pages marked line item transfers are exactly that. Those are interdepartmental line item transfers, lines within each department where some lines have went a little short, some lines are in good shape. Typically what happens in this sense for budget purposes is there's an over expenditure or carry and or repairs that need to be made, or cost of an item or particular items over the period of the fiscal year go up. I'll note a couple of items in particular. Street department salaries, we had to put a little bit of an increase in this line item transfer for that. We did hire some individuals to assist with moving forward on the public safety complex, and I don't know if any of you have been there recently, but if you compare that to where it's been about a year ago, you'll see significant progress there. So having those part-time individuals to do some carpentry work kind of bumped that line up just a little bit. And you can see the reductions in the brackets of what we took away from in some of those projects finishing out the fiscal year. This is something that does not need to go to the auditor's office. It does not change the appropriated overall budgetary amount within each department, so therefore it does not require any approval from the state auditor. However, it does require unanimous, or not unanimous approval, at least a majority approval by council for these line item transfers. Again, none of these departments increase. We're just transferring lines within our budget. My recommendation is for council to approve the line item transfers.
Motion to approve the line item transfers. Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
And second. Any question, discussion? All in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it.
And I thank you. Then, just under the rest of my report, I do want to notify council that we did receive our Brick Street Workers' Comp renewal for 2013-14. That annual amount is $145,119, which is actually a reduction from the current fiscal year in the amount of $4,436. It actually went down, the payroll went up, so go figure. The next council meeting that we have, I'll be making some recommendations regarding some changes and additions to our employee handbook, particularly discussions about workers' comp claims, return to work policy, and also motor vehicle policy. Motor vehicle policy is something that we talked about when we were looking at our liability and casualty insurance a few months ago. Also want to advise council again that tomorrow at 2 o'clock, notify the press, we will be doing the closing with our USDA loan regarding the conference center at Brushy Fork. It's been something we've been working on for about a year. It's about a month later than what I had anticipated, but nevertheless, that date is finally here. We'll be doing the closing on that loan tomorrow at 2 o'clock here at City Hall. Again, we will be closing out the 2012-13 fiscal year over the next week and a half. So my financial report for July will be delayed until the second meeting. And finally, some of you, I'm not sure if you get the West Virginia Municipal League newsletter, but pay close attention to an item on there. They're having their annual conference August 7th through the 9th. The reason I bring that up is if you look at the agenda on August the 8th, they're going to devote a whole day entirely to home rule. So we'll have speakers there, and I know that's something that the mayor and council's requested that me to look into. So if you can make it down to Charleston, that's my pitch for the league. If anything, to attend on August the 8th and attend some of those sessions to hear some folks' experiences with that as we make a determination of whether we're going to pursue home rule next year. That's all I have.
On that subject, any of you who are planning on attending, I would encourage you to get your name in the pot. You know that lots of times it's difficult to get reservations if you wait too long. And if we could contact Amby by next Friday with your intent, if you intend to go. And she will make a reservation and arrange for direct billing.
It was at the 7th, 8th, and 9th?
7th through the 9th, yes.
7th through the 9th.
Yeah. But it's Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night.
I want to make one note in addition to my report. I think some of you have, I don't know if Teresa passed out to all of you, but some of you do have the complete budget for 2012 and 13. That represents the changes and the adjustments that you made tonight. So that is up to date and current and will not change between now and the end of the year, which is literally a week and a half away. And particularly for Tom, if you have any questions about that or anything, please, I encourage you to give me a call so you can get a pretty good idea of where we were budgetarily for this current fiscal year.
Thank you. Matt, Gregory,
I have a question for
Go.
Michael. When would you anticipate that you would be making a recommendation to the council in regard to taking a look at paying off some of our indebtedness out there that has a higher interest rate than?
Well, it's a good question. We have a council meeting July 2nd. It's really coming right into the fiscal year. And our next council meeting is the 18th, and I have to have revisions to the state auditors by that next week, which is the week of the 22nd through the 26th. I'm not quite sure. I think it's the 23rd, I think is when I'm doing it. What I'd like to do is get you some some information for the July 2nd meeting, so we can talk about it, and if there's any particular direction or anyone wants to go with council, I can make those adjustments accordingly. I mean, obviously, there's a few things that we need to look at, legal stuff, and a few other items that we'll need to talk about. I don't want to spring that all on you on the meeting when we have to make those decisions that day, because I've got to send it to the auditor, 72 hours later. So I hope to have something to you so we can talk about it July 2nd.
Okay. And we can give you a jingle to discuss that a little bit further?
Absolutely.
All right.
Jingle away, all the way.
All right.
okay. Matt Gregory begged off this evening. He's involved with a Bible school at his church. He'll be here a little bit later. Sam Ludlow, city engineer.
The sanitary board did meet this afternoon. We continue to talk about the NPDS permit and the issues surrounding that permit. Our technical expert, Clyde Wilbur, visited Buckhannon, went through the plant, looked at the river in preparation for meeting with DEP. We did have a meeting with DEP on June 6th. That meeting also included Eli McCoy from Potesta Engineers. He actually used to be the head of the water and waste section of DEP. So he's been a valuable support person to us. Clyde had prepared a report relative to one of our permit parameters that are of issue, oxygen demand, BOD, ammonia, and dissolved oxygen, and presented information to DEP. And we didn't expect a response that day, but they did seem to receive the information favorably. They're obligated to review it and respond to us. We've scheduled a conference call with them for next week with those same parties. And then possibly another meeting with them in late mid-July to review the status of their evaluation if we haven't gotten a positive response. So that is ongoing. It's a pretty significant matter for us, because if we aren't successful with this, it probably means adding a process unit to the plant, which could be pretty expensive. We also had some discussion on the Weston Road extension project out past where we go now, out to Rennie's Mobile Village. We made inquiry to the railroad about the opportunity to get more of the old railroad grade, and we're waiting for a response from them. They've actually been provided more communication than we might have expected, but we still don't have an answer from them. And that'll have a lot of bearing on how we undertake a project. We got an inquiry today from some residents in that general area seeking service, so there certainly is interest. We continue to work on the storm sewer project. That's partly on Pocahontas, partly on Fayette. We've actually laid all the main line pipe and are putting in some connector lines and drop inlets, and that project will be complete. And our part of it, there's still street work going on both streets. We had some discussion as kind of follow-up to a superintendent's meeting that we had a couple weeks ago here relative to some construction issues that all the departments seem to be having about where to waste bad material that we excavate, or where to get borrowed material if we do waste material and have to have fill. And we all seem to be having concrete issues of where to get concrete at a reasonable price and with reasonable conditions. It is a matter, all three of those are an important issue to the street department, water department, and the sewer department. We're back working on the Elias pump station. We were waiting on a part. We're updating the electrical service at that pump station. We've had several inquiries for sewer extensions, for development activities at the Northridge development, mini mall out next to the Microtel, between it and Pizza Hut, and out on the Burton Phillips farm near the Little Sand Run Road. And as a result of the amount of work that is being proposed that we may have to undertake, the board authorized advertising for another line crew member for the sewer department. That was all.
Questions for Sam? Thank you, Sam. Tom and Kelly. It's Tom tonight, okay.
At the water board meeting, we discussed the progress of the National Guard Armory water line. Kelly reported that the line project is approximately 1/4 finished. Currently, they're inside the ABB lot, where all the junk car lot area. They're about halfway through that lot, so it's moving, I think, at the pace that he wished it would. No major issues at this time to report. Just past that, they did a tie-in on the road. I guess it would be the Brushy Fork Road, a state road crossing. They got that tie-in completed. So the water line will have a sort of a circular pattern or whatever. It won't be a dead end. It'll be a tie-in with an existing system out there that hopefully will keep the water fresh and flowing in all directions. I reported on the AWWA conference held in May at Glade Springs. Two of us from the plant went to that conference, had some great educational opportunities. We got to attend particularly generator sizing and some of the troubleshooting techniques involved with that in running your plant and your pump stations. That was very beneficial to some of us as we have that equipment on hand, and it just enhances our ability to maintain it. So we're appreciative of that. There was one boil water issued in the month of May. It was on Pocahontas Street. That was due to a main break that got caught during the construction process. Do you know how many customers were affected offhand? About 10 customers were affected by that main break in boil water. But within 24 hours, everything was back to normal.
Tom, how do you communicate that to the personnel?
Most of that is directed by the health department. It depends on what type of break, how many people's affected, what time of day it is. It could be anywhere from door to door, knocking on door to door, leaving notes on doors, using the TV and the newspaper or the radio. It just depends on the magnitude of the event as to how we're directed. Once we issue a boil water, we got to, within a few hours, contact the health department, and they direct us on not only sampling, but how to notify those affected and also how it will be lifted. So each event's a little different. Also, busy time of year with keeping up on our sites, site maintenance and pump stations and tank sites. The grass grows vigorously this time of year, so we're very heavily involved in a lot of that as time and weather permits between raindrops. And in closing, if I may, I'd like to take a moment to unfortunately tell you, if you haven't heard of the passing of a longtime city employee and water department person who was a department director and also a supervisor and a friend, that would be the passing of Jack Ford. He was buried Saturday. Jack, again, I believe he spent 33 years with the city. His son Jeff works for the wastewater department, and we're going to miss him tremendously. That's all I have, Mayor.
I'd like for us to take another moment of silence and think about Jack Ford and his family. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Okay, David McCollum.
Mayor, two things. Following up on the last council meeting with respect to Rob Price's activities with his metal detector, a letter was delivered last Wednesday or Thursday, I believe, to him, and that letter is in your packet. As far as we know, he has been compliant with the city's directive. Been working with Mr. Doss and Mr. Holland and everybody else necessary to help put things in a position for the armory closing tomorrow. Continued work on the HISM litigation. We're going to take up an executive session where I'll give you some additional information. Before we get into Ordinance 375 on your final reading under strategic business, you have a draft of what would be Ordinance 376 of the City of Buckhannon, and if you let me take you through the highlights of that real quickly, that's the most substantial thing that I have to report this evening. This has to do with the city's establishment of residency requirements for our public safety employees, first responders. This would be Ordinance 376 of the City of Buckhannon and Ordinance 1 requiring all public safety personnel, that is police officers and firefighters, hired by the City of Buckhannon following the effectuation date of this ordinance to reside within 10 linear miles of the City of Buckhannon's public safety complex. 2, grandfathering in certain situations, current public safety personnel for application of this ordinance. And 3, providing for a grace period for relocation of all newly hired public safety personnel to comply with the provisions hereof. And there's not too many whereases to this ordinance, so let me just read through them quickly so we're familiar with those sections that are critical to our understanding what we're doing here. Whereas Chapter 8, Article 5, Section 11 of the West Virginia Code specifically grants the power and authority unto municipalities to establish residency requirements for municipal employees, and whereas the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals has specifically ruled that public safety personnel are subject to a municipality's reasonable residency requirements, notwithstanding civil service provisions of the West Virginia Code. Whereas the Council of the City of Buckhannon believes that the city's paid public safety personnel, that is police officers and firefighters, due to their positions as first responders, are in the best position to be most expediently dispatched during emergencies arising within the City of Buckhannon if those public safety personnel reside reasonably close to the city's corporate limits. And whereas the council of the city of Buckhannon further believes that establishment of a residency requirement by all city public safety personnel within 10 linear miles of the city's public safety complex situated at One Friendly Way in Buckhannon is a reasonable and appropriate requirement. And whereas the provisions of Chapter 8, Article 5, Section 11 of the West Virginia Code further specifically provide that the determination of residency requirements for any municipal officers and employees shall be effectuated by ordinance. And whereas the council of the city of Buckhannon desires in all respects to fully comply with the statutes and other laws of the state of West Virginia, insofar as the establishment of the provisions of this ordinance are concerned, now therefore be it ordained and enacted by the council as follows. Article 1 is simply the title of the ordinance, which would be City of Buckhannon's Public Safety Personnel Residency Ordinance. Article 2, the findings of council. There are 3 of them. They partially embody the whereas paragraphs. There are a number of beneficial reasons to require city public safety employees to reside within or reasonably close to the corporate limits of the city of Buckhannon, including their ability to be most expediently dispatched during emergencies. B, requiring residency of public safety employees within 10 linear miles of the city's public safety complex is a reasonable and appropriate requirement. C, the provisions of this ordinance shall apply to all public safety personnel hired on or after the effectuation date of this ordinance, except that newly hired personnel who do not already reside within the 10 linear miles of the city's public safety complex shall have an established period of time following their date of hire to relocate their residence to comply with these provisions. There are 3 definitions that follow that are important to application of the exceptions section that follows. Date of hire means the date upon which the city council approves the employment of a particular police officer or firefighter. Linear mile means a straight line unit of length equal to 1,760 yards or 5,280 feet, or if you like the metric system, 1,609.344 meters. 344, that's 2 4s in there. Very important that we get that last 4 in there. I started to have aerial or air miles in here, and I'm not an old military guy, but something was something in the back of my head saying, you better check the definition of an aerial or air mile, and it's a military term, and it's actually 6,000 feet. It's not 5,280 feet. As an old military Army guy, the mayor knew this, but it just kind of, so that's the reason that we have linear miles as opposed to air miles or aerial miles. Public safety personnel or employee means any paid, Mr. Pugh was mentioning to me at the outset of the meeting that someone had contacted him about concern that, gee, we have enough trouble getting volunteers for the fire department. Why would we do this? This does not apply to the volunteer fire departments. It only would apply to future hires of paid members of our fire department. So it means any paid City of Buckhannon police officer or firefighter, including the chiefs of the police and fire departments. However, this shall not include appointments made pursuant to urgent reasons for filling a vacancy in any position in the city's police or fire department. And I'll explain that under the exceptions section. Then there are 4 exceptions to the application of this ordinance that are under Article 4. The first exception, any public safety employee whose employment commenced prior to the effectuation date of this ordinance, who then was residing beyond 10 linear miles from the city's public safety complex, provided that if any such public safety employee during their continued city employment subsequently establishes residency within 10 linear miles of the city's public safety complex, then that employee shall be required to thereafter continue to reside within the 10 linear miles and to otherwise abide by the provisions of this ordinance. So if you have somebody that's 12, 15 miles out right now, they move to town, they decide they don't like town, and they want to move back out in the country 15 miles away, they are now within the restricted zone. They have to stay within that 10 linear mile area.
Establishing residency, does that mean that they change their voter registration address or driver's license address or what?
Various ways to establish residency, buy a home,
Rent?
change your voter's registration, change your license information. We at City Hall monitor our employees' residences very, very closely. Mr. Dawson rattled off all 85 employees' addresses. He probably has them memorized. And, so that's tracked very, very carefully. The employees establish what their residence is. The second exception, any police officer employed as a provisional police officer pursuant to the statutory provisions of Chapter 8, Article 14, Section 16 of the West Virginia Code, that is, pursuant to urgent reasons for filling a vacancy in any position in a paid police department. And I want to take this up with C also. Any firefighter employed as a provisional firefighter pursuant to the statutory provisions of Chapter 8, Article 15, Section 21 of the West Virginia Code. We've had a number of situations over the years where we're down a person or two on the police department especially. I can't recall off the top of my, yes I can too. Actually we brought Buddy Ray Zickafus back for a short period of time a number of years ago as a part-time provisional firefighter.
And we had Adam Gissy back.
Adam Gissy as a police officer. Lewis Anderson served a couple of stints as a provisional officer. And the point is if you're in an emergency, urgent situation to try to man your shifts with the police officers, that old saying about beggars not being choosy, we're not going to care at that juncture if we have to go to Rock Cave or Weston or Clarksburg or Elkins to bring them in. So those two are exceptions with the police and fire departments respectively. And then lastly, D, any, it's not a permanent exception, but it's a temporary exception, any newly hired public safety employee during the first 6 months of their employment with the City of Buckhannon, provided that any such newly hired public safety employee may, upon showing of good cause or special hardship, request the City Council in writing to extend their relocation of residency to conform to the requirements hereof, but further provided that any such extensions may not equal or exceed the 1-year probationary period prescribed by statute for public safety employees. That is, all newly hired public safety employees must establish their residency within 10 linear miles of the city's public safety complex prior to the expiration of their 1-year probationary period. Violations, and as has been a couple of times now, established by the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals, you do not need to go through the termination proceedings provided by civil service. It's entirely a personnel matter. If they don't conform to the residency requirement, if this is what the council adopts, they are just notified of their termination. Severability, that's standard provision in all of our ordinances. The effective date, if you would entertain this on first reading at your next meeting on July 2, second reading and adopt on July 18, it would become effective on August 18. So there's no action tonight. This is simply a draft for you all to study and become comfortable with between now and July 2. If you have some substantial problems with it, please notify me as soon as possible so that we can discuss it with the chiefs. I would note that the current informal policy of the city police department, there is none for the fire department. The police department has 15, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's road miles from the corporate limits. This actually will establish an epicenter, being the public safety complex. An arc would be drawn 10 miles out. I'm told by both Chief Tacey and Chief Gregory that we do not have any current public safety employees who live beyond that 10-mile arc. So we'll actually be in conformity from the get-go. That's my understanding. So again, discussion, feel free to have at it, but it's not a first reading until your next meeting on July 2.
States in here, all newly hired public safety employees. Reading that might seem to me that if they need a secretary or something like that at their complex, they might be required under these same requirements.
I have a definition as public safety employee in Article 3, means any paid City of Buckhannon police officer or firefighter.
Okay.
So it's only the civil service folks that get paid.
Is there a survey or anything done on how many other municipalities in the state have enacted an ordinance like this?
A number of them have Clarksburg, Fairmont, Morgantown, Wheeling, Charleston, Huntington, Beckley. Not sure about Parkersburg.
Do they do air miles or road miles, do you know?
Different
There's
strokes for
no-
different folks.
Okay.
Some smaller counties say you have to live within the county. Some bigger cities say you have to actually reside within the corporate limits. Places that are a little bit bigger than us, like Fairmont, I think there's, if I'm not mistaken, if Mitch Tacey was here, he could tell you, I think it's 15, and I think they actually have aerial miles. So if anybody wants to sue Fairmont, they would be 6,000 feet per mile, as opposed to 5,280. But anyway, yeah, I hope that helps.
Okay, yeah.
For our purposes,
Well, the reason I ask is that, linear miles, within a radius of 10 miles, you could be in a situation where somebody could be within that radius, but they could be, as the crow flies within 10 miles, but the way the roads go and where they would have to drive, they could be an hour and they could be some significant length of time where the current policy is road miles, and road miles, a certain number of road miles, you're going to be able to get somebody in within a certain amount of time. Was there any, maybe what we need to do is just take a look at the map and see, is there any potential area where somebody could be within the policy or within the ordinance, but still be significantly far away from the public safety complex by measure of time and travel?
the chiefs who I've kind of have taken primarily the direction from, since this ordinance is being advanced by them, have done that.
Okay.
There is mapping available that would, and it's, we're very privileged to have a very sophisticated mapping system here at City Hall. And as we advance into the actual readings of this ordinance, I plan on having Susan Ford, who's been out the last few days, given her father-in-law's passing, to have her actually have the map that would show all that. I don't think there's anything that's going to be extremely unduly restrictive to the public safety folks, or that will prevent them from making the public safety complex in a 15 to 20 minute time frame.
Okay.
One of the difficulties, because we had some discussions on those topics, was the next step is now you start to consider the type of road. Because if they're X miles away and it's quarter H,
Yeah.
that may be a lot different than if they're X miles away and it's a gravel road. So now do you start weighing that in too? So after a while, the complexity
It's just simpler to keep it with radius.
There's no, I'd like to say there was a perfect formula for this, but this is better than what we have. And in the past, if we would hire someone from Morgantown, and there would be this oral assurance that, oh yeah, we're gonna move to Buckhannon. We've had these situations arise before where someone comes on and they really almost look at it as though, well, I'm gonna give Buckhannon a try, and if I don't like it, I'm still, and there's really nothing that we can do without an ordinance to require them to get fairly close to us.
But this 1 year probationary situation, that's
covered under
during the
civil
first
service.
6 months of their employment, okay.
Yeah, they have 6 months. If they can't sell their house in Morgantown, they can't, whatever it is, they can petition the city council. You are the employer, the governing body. They can petition for an extension to be able to do this, but any extension that you would grant would not be able to come up to that 1 year probationary period. The thinking being is if you haven't complied with the move by day 364, the city will terminate you.
I know there's other cities around, I don't know, there's Netherford or Bridgeport, but their chief lives in Philby. So this is a wise move, I think, to do something like this. I like the 10 miles rather than the 15 that was originally discussed. Thank you.
Okay, Dave, you got anything else?
Just Jack Ford was a heck of a guy. I certainly chime in with the mayor. My entire time here, he's been a good buddy, and we miss him.
He was one of the good ones. Brings correspondence, David already told you about the letter on the metal detection. There's also included in your packet a copy of the lease agreement with the National Guard. Brings the consent agenda, minutes of regular meeting in June 6th, building and wiring permits, and approval of payment of bills. Entertained motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. Discussion? If not, all in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Second and final reading, ordinance number 375, our junk ordinance.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll read this just by caption only, as is our custom, and as is required by charter and state code. This is the second reading of ordinance number 375 of the city of Buckhannon. An ordinance, 1, prohibiting the storage, collection, parking, leaving, depositing, maintaining, reserving, putting aside for future use, permitting or allowing to remain on any porch, balcony, roof, patio, or yard, other than in a completely enclosed building or structure, certain materials, including but not limited to junk, rubbish, clutter, litter, debris, lumber and building materials, and upholstered furniture, mattresses, materials, and other similar products not normally intended, designed, built, or manufactured for outside use within or upon any property situated within any residentially zoned district within the corporate limits of the city of Buckhannon, and 2, establishing penalties for persons violating the provisions of this ordinance. You had your public hearing at the outset of this meeting. In your packet, you have the legal ad that was published last Wednesday, which was more than 5 days prior to tonight, to give everyone opportunity to attend that public hearing. If you pass this on second reading this evening, it would become effective on July 19, 2013. It's my recommendation that you approve on second and final reading ordinance 375.
Motion to approve ordinance number 375 on second and final reading.
I move we approve ordinance 375 on second and final reading.
Is there a second? Second. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Makes it unanimous. Comments and announcements. John?
Announcements, no. Comments, one about the condition of the railroad tracks out here on 20 North. Very rough to get over. They did some work on those, at least the railroad company did not too long ago. Every other place in town is real smooth driving over the railroad tracks, and those you have to slow down to 5 miles an hour to keep from knocking your tires out of alignment. I don't know whose authority it is to contact anybody, but it's in the city limits, and I think we should contact the appropriate personnel to get those smoothed out a wee bit.
We'll contact A&O and see what we can do.
Okay. Have a great week.
Tom?
Only to add that recognizing our state's 150th birthday this week, and if we were better singers, I'd say let's all join our rendition of My Home Among the Hills, but I think we'll spare the viewers that pleasure. But
And you turn us off anyway.
Here's to 150 more.
Thank you. Rich?
While we're talking about history, I had a tour of the new exhibit at the History Center this afternoon, and I strongly encourage folks to stop in Sunday afternoons from 1 to 4 and view a very delightful exhibit on Buckhannon, some of the important people of Buckhannon and of Upshur County. Very, very fine exhibit. That's all I have.
John?
Just to want to thank folks like Michael and Christine, people that come to these meetings regularly, at least show some interest in how this is working. Tonight we had a meeting to consider an ordinance that we were looking at, and again, no one really attended or cared to come and comment, and there are ways to affect this kind of stuff. I can say in the last few years that we've considered some things. People have been able to come and have intelligent dialogue with us about it, that we've been able to consider and change position and to think about those things. And there are a lot of people out in anonymous spaces like Topics or internet spaces like What Buckhannon Needs Group, a lot of other places that have a lot of opinions on this stuff. There are openings on boards. There are places where we need folks to serve and where you can make a difference by getting involved that way. And so I would implore you, like some of the people that come and do that, to please come do that, because this is the space that we would love to hear that stuff and to consider those things in person.
Thank you, John.
Please get your
Well
facts
said.
straight too before you put anything on.
We have good newspapers that take the time to report this stuff, and it would be great if people took the time to understand it and talk to us.
Good. Pam?
What are we gonna be doing about the Tucker Street property that's still not cleaned up?
Actually, I think it's now in the city's hands. I'm not sure that we ask to do much more than what has been done at this point.
Cut the rest of the wall down.
Oh, yeah, there was somebody up there with an end loader doing something on the wall this past week. I thought they would use it and take the rest of the stuff, but the end loader's gone and everything's still there.
Well, I think it's pretty close to, if we're gonna do something, then we need to do it, but,
Maybe time for us to clean it up.
we take a look at that and see what you think.
Let's put a timeline on it.
We've had so many timelines,
Yeah,
David, I think we just ought to go in and do
Yeah,
it.
I mean, if we don't put a timeline on it, we'll be talking about this a year from now.
Well, that's true.
I think it needs to be done at least before school starts back up again.
Oh, I think it'll be done next week.
Well, I do too, but, you know.
Check with Jerry
Check with Jerry, I know.
and Kelly and Sam and ask them if they've got anything to do.
I'm sure they don't, but an hour and a half with a good end loader up there would clean the whole thing up just about.
Actually, I was thinking more along the lines of an opportunity to get rid of some of their substandard material they were talking about earlier.
Make a mountain there.
Wouldn't do that.
Mayor, if I could add to Mrs. Capari's comments and query, I'm not so sure that, given the fact that all of the above-ground debris has now been removed, that there's anything that we can do under either the zoning ordinance or the housing enforcement ordinance. However, under this ordinance that you are contemplating adopting in July, construction debris would be included in that.
Yes.
So.
30 days from now, we've got to read it.
Exactly, exactly.
What is above ground debris? Every brick that's on there was above ground.
There's a big concrete, ugly-looking concrete pad in the middle of this lot.
That is
Yeah.
stacked, still with brick on it.
If there's things above ground, that's one thing.
It's above ground.
Clearly, that stuff would fit the description of what we have in this new ordinance that you're contemplating. I'm not real comfortable in going before the municipal court judge under either our current housing enforcement ordinance or zoning ordinance and say, this is a clear violation. Before, when we had a building that was falling down, it was a clear violation. There's no building left.
There's portions of it left.
A little bit, a little bit.
That back wall at the corner's gone.
Zoning code doesn't start until above 30 inches, anyhow.
We specifically say in there, driveways, patios, stuff that's on the ground level does not count for purpose of application of the zoning ordinance.
But we'll continue to work.
If anybody needs any little bricks, just go by and get them.
Yeah, have at it. Brick pieces. Anything else, Pam? I know that wasn't much of an answer, but-
They're going.
Dave, you remember?
I don't remember hardly anything anymore, but it just shows us the importance of this new ordinance 375 that we just passed, and that I think one of the real key cornerstones is to make sure that we enforce the ordinance and that we do it on a timely basis. I think that's really very critical. I would still like to have a representative of the Fraternal Order of Police come here and make a comment about them asking for monies for the Children Fund and what their actual involvement is. I think we still need to do that and get clarification on that and not wait too much longer on it. I also would remind people that there are appointments that are going to be made in the next, I don't know whether it's going to be on the 2nd or the 18th, but I do think we need to have serious look at term limits for committee members and for board members. I think that's very critical for the future, and that's something that we should discuss with when we look at the bylaws in the future. And I also want to say my prayers and thoughts to Jack Ford's family. I met him not quite 30 years ago when I first came to the college, and he was a real gentleman. I didn't really know Jack very well, but whenever I had to have contact with him, he was a real nice person and a real gentleman. So my prayers and thoughts are with his family.
I remember what I wanted to say.
Okay.
Jay isn't here, but are the sidewalks going to be started on 1st of July?
Michael, I think you're better up on that than I am.
Actually, still have not received an official notice to proceed on it, to do that. We're still waiting for some SHPO feedback.
Do we need to push them on something like that, Michael, instead of just waiting for them to?
Yeah, Jay's been pushing them. I mean, I can say that Jay's a pusher, but it could be
All
another
the
month.
material that they desired has been submitted 2 weeks ago. They approved it all. Earlier submission, they wanted a couple of other items done. They wanted the text that we were going to put on the signs at the library, and we sent them that. So it's solely in their hands now, and they've indicated when they're ready, they'll let us know.
I would throw one other comment out about the seasonality of, working on certain contracts or projects that we're working with, that, with the kind of rainy day fund we have, we may want to take a serious look at. Again, Michael, this is in your purview, but, where can we get some seasonal workers that would be able to help us on some of these projects and get it done on a more timely fashion? Because I know the guys are, really putting 100% effort in, and, I mentioned this last year, there may be periods where you want to have people work some overtime too, if they want to, so that's something to think about.
Dave, I want to mention something again. I know I'm not under comments, but I put some information in your box. And if you go on CNN, they did a partnership with the Tampa Tribune about the 50 worst charities in America, and it outlines, I think Dave may have emailed that to you. Also, ironically, on the West Virginia Secretary of State's office, which I frequent quite often in my leisure, on their website, Action for Other Reasons, actually has a notification there about what to do if you're approached by a charity and questions you may ask them. And actually, the Secretary of State's office, if you feel questionable about a charity, you can contact them and make a case or complaint or what have you. But it's actually pretty impressive. They have about 5 or 6 menu items that people can log on and take a look, and it's on the West Virginia Secretary of State's main page. You just click on up top corner. So.
Out of those 50 worst charities, there were probably 6 or 8 that had something to do with law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Others with veterans and many other tear-jerking reaction committees that would equate to tricking older people into giving their money to them.
There may be something for the press. I mean, if you can direct people to, it's right on the main Secretary of State webpage, but a copy of that's in your box, Dave, if you want to get that.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I might add that today on Channel 4, they actually did a story on the Fraternal Order of Police out of Clarksburg, and they're putting together a police academy together for a whole week with 70, 75 kids. Not unlike what Matt does, but it is actually through their lodge, Fraternal Order of Police. So if you want to catch that, it may give you some insight. So yes, I do believe they do actually do some really good charity work.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Anybody else? We're going to have an executive session here in a little bit. And the reason I say in a little bit, I told Matt we would wait for him because he's going to come right after his Bible school, which should have finished at 7:30. If you've ever worked with a group of kids like that, you know it takes a little while to get away from them. But he's coming, and so I would entertain a motion. We entered into an executive session, 698-4, for litigation pending the Hisson suit, and I will tell the press that I do expect to come out of that meeting and make a decision. And you can stay or leave your cell phone number, and I'll call you. Somebody will call you. Both of you will be called.
And we could be in session for quite a while, too.
It could be a while, yeah.
I move we enter.
Got a motion from Mr. Ball.
Second.
And a second. All in favor, signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye.